but we will be recording it now. And if you have any questions, you can email me during the webinar or just put something in the chat pod. And at this time, I will hand it back over to Marion. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Coleman, teacher coordinator from Los Angeles Unified School District, Division of Adult and Continuing Education. Or is it community education? Or is it career in education? Anyway, Dave,
All
thank you
good.
for being here.
Can you hear me, everyone? If you're having any issues with sound that might be on our end, please go ahead and type in the chat box. I will be checking to make sure that things seem audible and clear to you. And I will be checking this general chat box along the way, as well as the specific, but your voice is low. Okay, I'm seeing that I need to turn up my volume here. Give me just a moment. That sounds. How is
Much
that?
better.
Is that better, folks?
Sounds good to me.
Louder is better? Oh, even louder. Okay. Oh, I'm seeing good things. Okay, let's get started then. I want to welcome you back if you were here with us on Valentine's Day for the introduction. And if you weren't, we're glad that you're here. As Marion said, Marion Thatcher, our hostess, thank you, Marion, we are focusing on application. And I just want to put it out here that there's a lot of things that we can say and do around this whole topic. And I just want to let you know that we're going to chop up our time together in about 4 blocks, and I'm going to zoom where I can zoom and slow down and process where we need to process. But of course, we're going to have time to do that in chat boxes and let us know using your little icon if you need more time or have questions. So let's get started. All right, first of all, I want to see who's in the room with us today. I need to do a little assessment here. So I'm going to do an activity that I do in my classroom called a corners activity for assessment. So look at the screen. The slide in the middle shows 4 corners. Go ahead and just type your initials in the box in the upper left corner where it says ESL, ESOL teacher if that's who you are. So for example, if that's me, I'm just going to put DMC and I show up. If you are a curriculum developer, that's a main priority for you. Put that in the top right corner. That's B, the green, to the top right. C is administrator or program advisor coordinator. And D, I think you're getting it, you're a content teacher. You're ABE Math or ASE or CTE. So we'll just take about 30 seconds. And what I'm doing here is taking note of who's here. I want to make sure that we cover things that are important to you and lets me know, obviously, that we have a lot of teachers in the room. We're glad you're here. We have some curriculum developers. That's great. Welcome to our administrators and coordinators. So excellent that you are here with us today to help give vision and leadership. And extra special shout out to our content teachers. I really appreciate your going above and beyond and seeing ways that you're going to want to connect with your basic skills and language development folks. So, real quick comment about this type of assessment. Have you done assessments where you give every student in the room a piece of paper and then they give them back to you, and at the end of the day you have 30 to 60 pieces of paper that you have to synthesize? Well, I hate that. So what I did was create a corners activity where I put a question on the front, people move to the corners, I make a quick note of how many people are in each corner or which is the dominant corner, and then we move on to a new question. It looks a little bit like this. Okay, you can see that there are 4 hands. Thumbs down, a little bit, thumbs up, double thumbs up. So when I do this assessment activity, I give 4 corners that pretty much stay in the same definition for what that corner is about. Corner A, as we move forward, is usually, I'm not interested in learning this. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. Corner B is, this is easy for me. Let's spend some time on this. Corner C is, I really need to work on this. And D is, this is difficult, or it's really important for me to do well in this. So let's take lots of time. So students can see where they're at. I can see where they're at. We can talk about it. However, we're not going to do this because that's a little wonky and difficult for an online webinar. So what I'm going to do is call out 6 questions, and you can respond to them according to how important things are for you. Now you should see 6 boxes in your screen, and if you can't, um, tweak things on your board. I know that, Jennifer, I'm seeing that only the first 2 categories. Maybe others can see all 4. Um, by the way, yes, I do get honest answers, Elisa, from my students about what they really think. If I'm very honest about them that it's all good, there are no bad answers, it's just to help us move forward. Okay, so what you're doing is basically telling me how important each of these questions are for you. So first question is, how important is it for you to have an overview of the English language proficiency standards today? Okay, and again, you can scroll, folks, on each of the boxes to see where you are in comparison to colleagues. Okay, so you'll see that 45% say this is really important. So I'm guessing some of you are new to this. That's important for me to know that. But we'll wait a little longer for more people to process that question or that category. The next category is a description of the level alignments. How important is it for you to know the alignments between the different standards? That's the CCRS, the ELPS that we're talking about, the NRS levels, model standards from before, and our funding agency. Okay? So that's high interest for a lot of people. Question 3 is, how important is using ELPS in your classroom? I'm guessing that's probably going to have a good amount of people interested. Question 4, differentiating instruction. How important is this for you to find some new strategies and to understand some basics even before that? Following that is scaffolding instruction. How important is this in your interest level? And finally, assessment strategies to help with differentiation. Okay, so you can see, I'll just talk a little while you guys continue to answer, that there are 3 categories this time, and these can be similar to the corners, but if you don't have a lot of room for your students to move, you just give them 3 color cards like the stoplight colors, green, yellow, red. Green is big, important, let's go. Yellow is not as much, slow down. Red is stop, no way. Or help, I'm stuck. So there's lots of uses, transferable uses for those 3 color cards that each student has. So I'm just going to take another quick look where we're at. Okay, so an overview. Most of you, about 90%, that say this is important. Okay, I'm going to just let you know we're going to move really quickly through that because you can access the webinar I did last time to get that overview. We'll do a little bit of review today, but we're going to mostly focus on some other things. And I'll be honest with you, it's not necessarily level alignments. We'll talk about that and we'll see what it all means and how to do something about it. But I'll be honest with you, level alignments are not all there yet for us from our leaders. That's okay. Number 3, yep, great. You want to use the ELPS in the classroom. That's excellent. Number 4, differentiating instruction. Yep, we're going to talk about that. Scaffolding, again, super important. Everybody almost in the room wants to know about that. And finally, assessment. Okay, this is important because whenever we talk about differentiation, we're talking about meeting the needs of students at different levels, so we need to know what their levels are. And so let's move forward as I address each of these things, starting with assessment. So we're not going to necessarily answer these questions now, and I did put these in the handout that you can download. These are things that we need to think about. When I think about differentiating and doing assessment of our students to see where they fit, I'm guessing that we all are on the same page that our students get assessed if we're at a main branch site or a big school at the office, and then they come to our classes and they're in a certain level. Okay, so excuse me. So my question then becomes is how much in-class, initial, and ongoing assessment do we do in our classrooms? In each of the language skill areas, I think this is something that we perhaps can grow in our ESL departments. If we're really going to work on increasing the rigor for students, we need to know where they're at. And that means maybe a writing sample, a basic literacy assessment. Do we have them read for us to hear their fluency and ask them some questions about reading comprehension? And then when we've done these assessments, what do we do with them? Do we use them to help us group students? So these are important considerations. And I think as we continue to work with differentiation and scaffolding at our schools, at conferences, um, with our students, we'll need to answer these. But I think most of you are really wanting to move forward with, okay, so let's assume that we've done that. How do we work with it? Okay, let's go back to our assessment questions. You guys want to know about an overview? Here's the quick and dirty on it. All right, an overview of the English language proficiency standards are that all classes are multi-level. How many times have you gone to a training and people say, well, I know you're in a single level class, but, and you smile and nod. What's happening is that the federal government and larger agencies are acknowledging the fact that we have multi-level classes. Okay? And what are they doing? They're directing us to deal with it, to be able to teach to those different levels. And it's upping the ante for us, but it also ups the results and improvement and gains for our students. So let me just stop and see if there are any thoughts on assessment that you might want to share in the chat pod in the right of the screen. We moved really quickly through that, and we could do a whole session on assessment because it's super important. And I'm guessing that a lot of ESL teachers like me for a long time didn't have a lot of training on how to assess students, especially in areas, the different components of reading. So I'm wondering if there are any quick comments on that before we move forward. All right, let's move forward. Real quickly, continuing with our overview, we know there are three themes of the standards, like we've talked about already: differentiation, scaffolding, and thirdly, and really important, is support for our students in content learning classes. Those are our CTE, the ABE Math, and all the ASE courses. So this is what we're going to talk about today. The last area is going to be addressed in our third webinar, May 24th, by Haida Wrigley. So I encourage you to sign up for that when it comes along. All right, so what are we doing today? Obviously, scaffolding, differentiation, and some strategies that give a big bang for the buck. We're going to talk about some implications of the ELPS, things to think about as we go forward. Okay, but first, some frequently asked questions. Okay, really important for many of you were the levels and the alignment. All right. Hi, Alexandra. I see what you're saying up there. Let me move on, though. So the question that I've heard from many people is, okay, we've got the ELPS, the CCRS, the old model standards, and the NRS. Which of these are going to drive curriculum instruction? Well, here's the answers. There are no new NRS levels as yet, so we're going to keep waiting for them. And from my perspective, maybe I'm wrong and you can weigh in on this, I don't think many of our teachers use these NRS levels yet in terms of knowledge of ranking and or rating students according to different levels. The next thing is that the CCRS is our new California adopted set of model standards, and we're going to use them. So they're really what is driving our curriculum development and instruction. And where does that put the ELPS? Well, as I've said before, there are LIPT. Those standards highlight how to differentiate, and scaffold, so our ELLs can reach those higher levels, the increased rigor, and be really successful in these content-based classes. I see your comment, Susan, and I will say, yes, we still use those model standards, and we're layering on over them, many of us. And some of our schools are not there yet. We know that, but we're looking forward. So thank you for that. All right. One other question. How do the ELPS level descriptors correspond to most schools' current course levels? And this is a kind of tying with what you're talking about, Susan. And the reality is that they don't at this point. They're a tool to help teachers describe the different levels of their students within their current course and within that possibly, quote, single level class. And the ELPS help us. They help us plan our instruction for the different levels by differentiating and scaffolding instruction. So let's look at some examples. A really nice thing that we have in the document, our English language proficiency standards, are some vignettes. There are 4 of them, and we're going to look at 2. This is vignette on page 1, on page 31, if you want to look at that. I want you to just listen and skim as I read this. If you haven't read it yet, just let's all look at it together. And the question is, what are some effective evidence-based strategies that Carlos employs? And Carlos is the teacher. He's teaching a low intermediate English language acquisition class. And he organizes this class in general skills by themes. He's been focusing on community, and so they've been looking at places and what people do in these places, such as banks, schools, post offices. Now he's turning to improving the community through activities such as a neighborhood watch and block clubs. And he's going to have students use internet and flyers to conduct small research projects to find out about these activities. And at the end of the week, students will work in a group to create a poster illustrating different ways that people improve their communities. Then they will showcase their poster to the class. So already you might be finding some effective evidence-based strategies that Carlos is planning on doing with the class with this unit. And go ahead and start typing them in the chat box below. I'll continue to read. So Carlos knows that he wants his students to read authentic materials, and he really wants them to get involved in their activities of the neighborhood. But he realizes that students may find these materials challenging if they're authentic, right? So he wants to shape his lessons to assist his students to gathering information, even though it's difficult to read. And he's going to look at the English Language Proficiency Standards, View 1, one of the two different ways that they're written up. So he really wants to focus in particular on the first standard, which says English language students can construct meaning from informational text through level appropriate listening, reading, and viewing. Okay, so he's accessing the standards. Then he wants to look at, as he looks at the standard, he looks at the level descriptors, levels 2 and 3, where his students generally fit. Okay, so he's starting to differentiate. He sees that he's two different levels of students within that class. And he realizes that the objectives of his reading-focused lessons can center on identifying the main idea and a few key details for his level 2 students. But he sees the more proficient level 3 students can be expected to answer questions about key details and summarize part of the text. So Carlos notes that the lessons he's planning to help his students access complex texts and that they correspond to the CCR reading standards 1, 2, and 7. So what do you take from this? What is he doing? Because as we'll say in just a minute, the standards are not necessarily giving us all new and we throw out what we currently have. What do? We start with effective evidence-based strategies. And we're seeing some of them. I'm going to go ahead and just call them out. We're looking at research. Yep. We're looking at using the internet, so technology and being more digitally literate. We're looking at group work. Yes. Okay. We know that's critical, and we'll keep talking about that more as we go. Again, I'm having a hard time scrolling, guys. Give me a moment here. Authentic print. Good. A lot of people are calling out the authentic materials. Collecting information. Great. I mean, these are real performance-based but authentic life tasks that people do when they want information to help them do what they need to do. Okay. Relevance. Super relevant. Okay. I think you get it. Oh, you're seeing that main idea, key details. Okay, so there's a lot of good going on in here. Okay. And that's just from the first two paragraphs that describe this. This is even before Carlos moves forward. Okay, I'm going to move us on and have us look at another. Well, let me just go ahead and call out those key things just as you did. Okay, so their students are learning about places in their community, so it's very relevant. They're building up prior knowledge. They're working in a group for support. They're conducting research, as you said. They're creating a poster, something they have to present, and this shows their learning. And they're going to showcase this poster to the class. All right. Thank you. Let's move along here. Now, this is probably pretty hard for you to read on the screen, so I'm not going to take much time with it. But I do want to call out this is the second of the 4 vignettes in the document, the ELPS. And this time we're looking at an integrated EL Civics class. Again, it's about an intermediate level, and some of the similar things rise up in this that came up in Carlos's unit. Students are doing research on things that are of interest to them, begin with their prior knowledge. They're doing speaking and listening, but they're mixing that with reading, and they're going to be doing some writing as they present information and prepare a presentation for the class to a slideshow. Okay, so really helpful, these vignettes. Let's talk about what applying the ELPS in a big picture sense looks like. Like we said, first of all, we start with strong, effective objectives. We figure out how we want to assess students to meet, how they meet those objectives, and then we create or draw from other sources activities and lessons. We align the student learning needs to the increased rigor of the CCRS. And I put little stars or asterisks next to this because these are highlighted and these are things we work on in the CALPRO CCRS2 training. And so if these sound important to you, you might consider those in the year ahead. And finally, where do the ELPS come in? Well, once we see where the rigor is, we're going to use the ELPS to help us differentiate and scaffold so our students can meet those higher levels of learning. So here's going to be a step-by-step. I'm going to run through this pretty quickly with you because people have asked me, well, okay, so I have this document in front of me. What do I do with it? How do I plan my instruction using the ELPS? Well, there's lots of ways. I'm going to say that first off, but here's one. And it starts with the CCRS, okay, because that's where we're headed. So step one is starting with assessment. We've given ourselves, our students tests, or they've taken them, and we find out that there's some needs that they have, okay? So we determine the CCRS strand and the anchor standard that corresponds to the results. So let me be clear here. What we do in our school district is we give a promotional test battery. And we found out that students, when we aggregated the data across our district, that was the biggest challenge for our students, was reading. And so we looked at the reading test requirements, and we saw that Anchor Standard 1 would probably be the most important. Okay, so again, reading, Anchor Standard 1, and this is basically reading closely to determine what the text says. And we looked at the correct level for our students. So we were focusing on reading for beginning low, so that was reading level A. So then what? Well, this is where we switch over to the ELPS. Okay, what you see on the screen is a table of correspondences of the proficiency standards to the CCRS. So let's talk about that. This is on page 75 in your ELPS book, and you're going to figure out what CCRS strand is connected to the ELPS. Okay, so we're going to see that it's number 1. You can see the column that says reading has number 1. So that's where we look on our left column, construct meaning from oral presentations, literary and informational text to level appropriate listening, reading, and viewing. There's that correlation or that connection, or as some people are saying in a little safer way, correspondences. I'm looking over at the chat pod here. Does level descriptor 5 precede CCR level A? Let me see if I understand that. This level descriptor 5. If you're talking about the ELPS descriptor 5, Carla, preceding CCRA, no. The level descriptors, as I'll show you in just the next screen, will come up on that. 1 is the lowest, 5 is the highest, whereas in the CCRSs, A is the lowest. So let's see if I can answer your question as we move along, okay? So let me go back. So to review, we've got our CCRS reading standard anchor number 1, and that correlates to ELPS standard number 1. If you have questions about that, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to move on. Okay. So then here it is, Carla, where we look for the level descriptions. And this is where the differentiation takes place in a deeper level. We look at the ELPA standard on the left in the gray, and then we find where our students are. For me, I like to use view 2. This begins on page 35. And If we're working with beginning level students, I know that these students are going to be in level 1 and level 2. So this helps me see what might be different, some of the lower level students and some of the higher, and what I need to do to differentiate. Let's just be honest, many of our teachers in adult education do not come to the classroom and start teaching as language development specialists. Many of us don't have TESOL masters or doctorates in language development. So I think what the government and what our educational agencies, OCTAE and CDE, are saying is that we're going to recognize that, and we're going to give some assistance to teachers to help view where their students are and differentiate. I'm looking at your question, Dory. ELP Standard 10 correlates to CCRS 1. Let me go back and see what you're talking about. 10. This is really about, and we'll see this more in a moment, but ELPS 10 is really about how students are, the mechanics and the way they're clearly communicating. So that's not as much about the CCRS 1 as it would be about some of the higher level ones, I think 6 or 7. I'm not sure exactly, but I hope that helps answer your question. So, one more step in the process. The English language proficiency standards give us a chart that helps us say, okay, if you got students at different levels, what are some ways that we can help them? Support and scaffold is what this table is called. And you can see there are 3 areas. The top is teacher language and teacher-student exchanges. And you see from left to right, ELP descriptor levels 1 through 5. And you can see there's a lot of overlap and things get a little bit more complex level 5. And that's where you're going to find an overlap with the CCRS. That's where they should be overlapping really strongly. The next level is materials and activities, and finally student groupings. And we're going to look at each of these more as we go. So if I have beginning level students, what are some ways that I can help them with their reading? Well, lots of modeling, practice in pairs and groups, extra time and repeated practice, students showing their answers by pointing or underlining versus writing sentences and such. Lots of use of visuals, use of sentence starters such as, here's the evidence, or I found it here, or I'm finding it here. Okay, so this is the series of steps. So to kind of recap that, I'm going to bump ahead, guys. Well, sorry. Let me share this with you. To put this in a lesson planning mode, if you want to create a lesson overview, you need to say, okay, what is our topic and what is our objective? And we're going to create a class objective for everyone in the room. And if you see yourself as having 3 different levels within your group, you're going to create objectives for each one of those. So if the overview, the class objective is if a student is involved in a robbery at home or at work, how will they be able to report the crime? Okay, so beginning level students, they'll answer simple questions about what the robber looked like. Higher level students within that same class describe and answer questions about the events in a robbery. And the highest level report it, and they themselves will ask and answer questions about the events. So then we said we need to create some assessment strategies. And again, there are 3 different levels. Low level, identify 10 physical characteristics. Higher level, 15 physical characteristics. And advanced levels, they're going to be doing a role play about events in a robbery. We can grid this and be more clear for ourselves as we teach. Focusing here on whole group presentation at the beginning around the shared topic of learning, which is robbery and reporting of crimes. And then moving into the likability groups, where students focus on what they need for their particular language development needs. So here's our recap. What are the steps? Determine the needs based on assessment Write learning objectives tied to the standards. Differentiate those objectives. Determine student evaluation tasks or assessments. Differentiate the assessments. Create learning activities and the sequence. Gradually release responsibility for the learning to the students. And you might want to use that model of whole class, big topic, cross ability. Now let's work in small groups with our likability, different language development levels, and then let's come back together for closure and community building. So really quickly, some resources for doing this. I'm a huge fan of teachingchannel.org. There's some great short videos on differentiating. Another leader in the field is Carol Ann Tomlinson. She's the guru on differentiated instruction. This is in the handout that I gave you guys, and I highly encourage you to research more if you want to develop in this area of differentiation. One real quick idea that I found on teachingchannel.org was learning menus, in which we give students choice and options. We give them appetizers, easy into activities. We give them an entree, heavier duty, more important work, and then a dessert, kind of a closure activity. All right, let's stop and take a moment here. We zoomed through differentiation. So how are you feeling about this? Let's take a little survey. All right. So how are you feeling, folks? Are you excited about differentiating instruction? Do you say, hey, I appreciate the process, but I'm a little concerned about the workload? You say, I want to research the resources you shared. Or D, are you feeling overwhelmed and your head is exploding? No? Wow, I'm loving it. No one's head is exploding. Well, 10% of your heads are exploding. All right. So most of you are pretty excited. The majority are appreciating the process, but you're concerned about the workload. I get it. So would you like us to go forward and see what else there is or how we can make it easier? Well, before we make it easier, I'm going to make it harder because we talked about differentiation, but the other key piece of this is scaffolding. And wouldn't it be great, though, if our textbook did this scaffolding work or differentiation work for us? I know publishers are trying to do that. They're working on that, and it's not out yet. So in the meantime, it's up to us. But let's talk about scaffolding. Okay, we talked last time about Scaffolding 101. What is it about? It's based on Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. And the skinny on that is that we've got students in the middle, the dark blue, who can do certain things, but they want to do more things. The light blue in the third ring is just beyond them. But the middle blue, or at least for now, but the middle blue ring is something they can do with help. And so that's what scaffolding is. That's the short story. Okay? Another way to think about it is moving from left to right, top to bottom. Lots of teacher responsibility where we focus our instruction. It's an I do, watch me class, I'm going to model, I'm the expert. Here's how we do it. We guide them and we incorporate them in a we do way where they help learn by showing us what they understand. And we do it together as we keep modeling. Finally, they do it alone in an independent learning way. And that's high student responsibility. That's the goal. Something that is in educational circles that is not on a lot of the traditional charts is this idea of y'all do, where it goes from a we do to a y'all do before doing it alone. And we know that in language development, as in learning theory, that giving people support through other more advanced learners is really important. So quick question here. Which one of these areas is your biggest challenge as an instructor? Is it being a good model, doing think alouds, and presenting well, concisely, with good language? Is it including students and keeping them with you in a guided instruction way before you have them do it independently? Or do you need to give them more opportunities to work in partners and small groups? Is that an area of challenge? Let's see what you think. Another possibility is that it's challenging for you to let your students take more agency, to be in charge of their learning, to set up the learning process in this clear release of responsibility so they are able to do it alone. We let go of their hands because we know them, we've given them the tools they need. Yeah. All right. So the independent learning is hard for many of us. Yeah. I think as ESL teachers, many of us are attracted to this field because we like helping and we understand we want people to communicate well and we want to be a part of that process with them. But we need to learn some ways to give them agency and to give them the responsibility for their own learning. Yeah, Mary, I see what you're saying. Is this more like +1? Yeah, it's exactly that. There's lots of language around this. Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of us are leaning in this, I'm seeing in your comments, of helping our students be more independent learners. Yeah, without translators. Okay, take a couple more moments to share where you think you need to be in this and just tuck that away as we go forward. Okay, examples of y'all do would be, I've given you an example and I've given you a specific skill, and I'm not going to tell you now to go write on your own. For example, it's a writing process. I'm not going to ask you to go write on your own. I'm going to possibly have you work in partners or in a small group, possibly with a sentence or a paragraph frame. The idea here is that people need support, and we know that the human element is profoundly important and helpful, but it can also be done through computer software. Okay. All right, I'm going to let Sashi and Susan finish off their input, and then we're going to move on. So we're talking again about scaffolding. Okay? Yep, lots of routines are super important. If we want our students to be comfortable with new work and surprising new expectations in a new culture, we need to set up the routines really well. Okay. All right, I'm going to move us on. I'm sorry, Mary. All right, so the document we have, our English Language Proficiency Standards, has this really helpful chart, which we referred to earlier. And there are 3 areas, and I'm going to go through each of those to talk about those. Okay, so let's look at the easiest one, the bottom. Student groupings, okay? Lots and lots and lots of research on how important it is for students to partner up or to work in small groups to increase the engagement, increase their chance at learning. Basically, something one of my bosses said is whoever's talking the most is learning the most. So that's something I try and keep in mind in a classroom. So what do you think are some of the implications for doing small group and partner work in our classes? What do we need to keep in mind? What makes them successful? What makes them successful? What do we need to do to set our students up for success? Okay. So ideas are coming in. I love that, Christy. Tell our students why. It's adult learning theory. We start with why. If people have a good why and they buy into the rationale for what they're doing, it seems relevant, they're going to do the good struggle of learning it, even when, like I say, it gets to be a little bit hard. They understand why they're doing something they're going to be more in. Okay, I am having a hard time showing these. All right, Susan said, again, super important at low levels. Give clear instructions. Nice. Yes. Again, clear instructions and clear expectations. Make sure that the task is doable. Great. If we're feeling like our students can't do it, we might be using language that's too high, or the task is too difficult. They don't have the language for it. Now we know from the research that there can be times when the first language can be helpful for process and metacognitive, but let's stay within L2 here, English. Excellently, modeling is critical. We need to really monitor and move around the room. There's no time for us to sit at our desk. We need to be out there and about there, making sure that they get it, that we can answer their questions, and that everybody's engaged, that there's equity in the process. All right, as you continue to type those out, I'm going to show a few things that I came up with, see if these Most of you have said these. First of all, if you are not trained, if you don't feel comfortable in grouping and working, having your students do cooperative learning, CalPRO has training. Spencer Kagan has training. Jamie Littleson Goldstein has amazing training on cooperative learning. Check them out. Get online, Google it, and get some training. Okay, really important. Build, grow, and maintain class community each week. If we're having people work closely together, we need to help them get to know each other and build trust and feel like it's a safe place. So we do that by helping them focus on shared traits and goals and respected differences. And we do this with both non-academic and academic tasks. Excuse me. We create groups intentionally, okay, using both crossability and likability. We do it with a reason. We help students create norms and rules for effective discussion and respectful discussion. Excuse me. We teach them the roles. Are you a speaker? Are you a secretary? Are you a timekeeper? How are we all engaged? And we can teach collaborative discussion skills and give them samples and prompts. I'll show you some examples. Really important, super important. We need to set up our room so that people can work in groups. If our desks are in rows, we're going to automatically have challenge having students work in groups. So consider your room setup. What can happen? What do we need to do? Excuse me. All right. One of the biggest things that we can do is engage students with each other. Tell a partner, ask a partner. This revolutionized my teaching life. Just by stopping and saying, not calling on one person, by having everybody call on each other. I'm going to move on. I want to show you, and this is in your handout, discussion helpers. If we want students to have effective discussions, we need to give them some help. All right? You can see there's different categories. The first one is asking for repetition. We need to help students know what good English is for getting advice, expressing appreciation, inviting others, taking turns, talking about procedure. We also want to help students monitor their learning, and we need to monitor their learning. Do we have a checklist for student engagement in appropriate behavior around group work? We can check groups by numbers of groups, or we can put individual names in the column on the left, and we can just do a checklist. Are people listening? Are they not interrupting? Is each person getting a chance to speak? And so on. I'm going to move us on. Okay. So that's working in pairs and groups. Let's talk about teacher language and exchanges. Okay. This is the language we put out there and the language that we want to use with students in exchange, and we want them to use in exchange with each other. I have 3 questions for you in the chat pods. As you look at these, what do you think, guys? Which of these is most important? Which of these is most difficult? And most important, how can we improve at these types of supports and scaffolds? How can we improve at giving wait time or contextualizing our learning or using our voice and bodies in ways that helps give more context? All right, Susan, you took the quick way out, but it's true. They're all important. Perhaps another way to ask the third box question is, what is the thing that you probably need to most improve? So just for yourself in that third box, I'll give you an example. So I gave you some instructions. I immediately expected you to have answers. Yeah, one-step directions. Great call, Carla. And I want to call out what Marianne called out as well, concentrating on meaning rather than correctness, guiding students to meaning. I think many of us I'll speak for myself, we're so excited about really tuning into rules around grammar that we got sucked into that rather than realizing, pull out, what is the big picture? Are people communicating? And what is the context for the communication? How necessary is it for them to be perfectly grammatically correct or have perfect mechanics? It's not always necessary. Let's start with the big picture, global things such as meaning, and then where context requires it, focus on correctness and accuracy. And I'm very uh, explicit with my students. Okay, it's fluency today, it's accuracy, or let's try and bring it all together. Okay, so we're looking at other things that people are saying. I think alouds, I agree with you, Susan, are very challenging, and they take practice, they take comfort, they take preparation. It's best when we have a text or when we have an activity that we have thought through what we're going to say before we do it. Okay. So just tuck that away. Make a note to yourself. For next school year, how can we improve our language? How can we improve interactions among students? That might be the key for your personal growth. If not tomorrow, maybe next year, around this category of our language. Let's look at the third category. I'm waiting for Angelique. All right. The last category is the largest. These are the materials and activities that we use with students. What are they working with, and how are they working with it? There's many, many of these. And as ESL teachers, if you have any experience, you know that all of these are critical. What I want to do is move us on, though. I want to share with you something that's in the handouts that Jamie Adelson Goldstein shared as a result of talking about cooperative learning with teachers in LA Unified School District. We created, or she created, sample beginning level ESL activities and tasks that correlate to the CCRS level A. So again, beginning level tasks related to language use and activities. These are all wonderful. There are many of them. So let's stop and process. How are you feeling about all this? Are you excited about scaffolding? Do you appreciate the process of how to, but it seems like a big workload? Are you finding some research that you want to research the document some more and think about the activities that I suggested that Jamie put out there? Are you feeling overwhelmed, or is your head exploding? A few of you. It looks like most of you are pretty excited, but you're seeing that there's a lot of work possibly involved. Yes. So that's what I want to talk about with you now. Okay? Well, here's the question. Wouldn't it be great if we had a few strategies that did this work for us and gave us a big bang for the buck, that incorporated these different types of activities, these scaffolds and supports, and that we could reuse them and recycle them, and they would do much work for our students' learning? Well, I want to share with you some work that I adapted from Doreen Ewirch, who's at University of San Francisco. She did a webinar last month, and she created a type of checklist for big bang for the buck activities. And here it is. Just talk through it with you quickly, share some examples, and then we'll close out our time together. When we think about differentiating and scaffolding in particular, here are some things that are important to keep in mind. We know from learning theory, we build on what we already know. So the first category, is it student-centered? Do we begin by accessing and having students pull up their current knowledge around a specific area? Collaborative. Are we having students work collaboratively? We know the research shows that's incredibly important. And when things seem dull and routine and we need to spice it up and create a little novelty, just having students talk to other students, and a number of them adds that that element that keeps them moving forward. We can get a lot of bang for our buck when we do whole language, where we integrate use of all language skills, listening, speaking, reading, writing. Are we really trying to do the next category as well? Have learners be independent oriented, meaning are we modeling strategies for self-directed reading and learning? Okay, this is really important. It has to do with repeating. Cyclical. Is what we're doing necessitating multiple passes through a text or a picture or a graphic for different content or language purposes? Is it critical thinking based? Are students having to synthesize? Are they going up Bloom's taxonomy to analyze, synthesize, evaluate, and create? And is it performance based? And this is probably as important as any of the others. Are students demonstrating the learning in multiple modes, in real, authentic tasks that they need to do in the real world? And are we, what I added was, we do this and help them with giving them clear, explicit expectations. And that comes through good checklists and rubrics. Okay, so real quickly before we break down this a little bit is, if you were curious, yes, the guiding principles from the English language proficiency standards are very clearly throughout all of these. So let's talk about bang for your buck activity number 1, jigsaws. I'm just going to call these out fairly quickly because most of you know what they are. If you're not sure, you can look in the handout for explanations, and I'll go quickly through it. But why would a jigsaw, let me talk through it with you quickly. It's great for any level. Materials is our text or a picture that's broken into chunks, and each person gets a chunk, then they have to report it to the group. It's teaching others. So most of us are familiar with this activity, so I'm not going to belabor it. But do you see how, you go back, does it begin with accessing learners' specific prior content knowledge? Well, if we put a warm-up out there and ask them, it will. Is it collaborative? Yes. Each person is required to be involved and they have a part to play. It's whole language. Students are reading, they're speaking and listening, and most teachers add a writing component with that or a presentational piece. Students are going to be self-directed, laying out how it works, and let them read and talk to each other. They're going to pass through the text a few times because they're going to be teaching others. They want to be confident. They want to know what they're talking about. We're asking students to summarize and put things and paraphrase in their own words, so it's very critical thinking based. And students have to tell what happened or what something is about over and over in life. So it's very performance based. Okay, so jigsaws. Next, categorizing and ranking or prioritizing. Whenever we have to put things in categories, we're evaluating, we're analyzing, we're trying to find out, we're making meaning. When we rank them, when we prioritize them, again, we're making meaning. And in your handouts, there are ways to do this for English language learners. The idea is that we have students rank something on their own. They rank it with a partner or a small group. All those small groups report to the large group. Those are put on the wall, and we prioritize them as a group. Multiple passes, critical thinking, evaluation, listening, speaking, writing, really big bang buck activity. Next, sorting. This is an example of categorizing. We did this in the first webinar. We talked about sorting the 10 ELP standards into 3 groups: productive language, receptive, and interactive. We also talked about, my process was, when I had to categorize these standards, I found they all revolved around this idea of meaning. Students finding it, creating it, and then clearly communicating it. Another big bang buck activity is having students find main ideas and summarizing in groups. You can see on the slide that there's students write their ideas about what they read in their corner, and then they come together and write down the main ideas. I see what you're saying, Susan. We'll talk about that in just a second. Another double whammy, great bang for the buck, are poster projects and a gallery tour. Most of you know that, and we saw it in both the examples in the vignettes earlier, that having students create something to present, a poster with visuals and keywords, is critical. And when we have students walk around and look at them and respond to them, we're giving them opportunities to evaluate, think critically, and to collaborate. Okay. So how are we feeling? Okay. I'm going to see how we're doing. One more survey. Jennifer's going to clear this. Do you find these strategies are going to help make you able to differentiate and scaffold, or maybe allow you to do some of the work of supporting your students without even necessarily beginning with assessment? I hope that you say, and I see that most of you are excited, that, and you'll have time on your own, obviously, to download this handout on the Doreen Ewart handout with, she has about 17 great big bang for the buck uh, um, strategies that you can immediately implement into your class that are going to very much support students according to the checklist. And that checklist is something that we can use, each one of us, as we think about our lessons. Are we doing these things with our activities? We don't have a lot of time with our students. How can we use it the best? What activities and what strategies are going to work the best? And I see in Ahora, we need more time to discuss the strategies, and this is what I want to tell you. We do need more time because there's questions we have. How do we build background knowledge without making that the focus of the lesson? Okay, I lost this. Thanks, Jennifer. How do I find visuals without an overwhelming time commitment? How do I use graphic organizers with beginners? How do I connect TPR to higher levels of thinking or writing? How do I use the first language of my students appropriately in class? And where can I access audiobooks for my class? Big questions. Okay? There's a lot of implications for this change. We need to continue to educate ourselves. There's so much to learn, and we need to honor and respect our adult students. We need to tell them why, as you said. And we may need to educate them about what effective instruction is and what brain-friendly learning is. They may come from backgrounds where they're the passive student. Maybe we were, and we grew up with lecture-based classrooms, and the teacher knows best. We need to change our approach, and then we can help our students. We need to appreciate their funds of knowledge. But most of all, and this is what Susan was referring to, and I think we're all getting this, we want to work on this stuff. We need time. We can't do it alone. And there is a push in education now to create professional learning communities. They are the proven best way to do this stuff, to be able to have time to talk, be strategic, and to make it happen and refine our work day after day in our classrooms. Do you have a way you can do this at your school? Would you like a way to do this at your school? Well, this Friday is the deadline for school team applications for the CALPRO PLC, Professional Learning Community of Practice. And I encourage you, as a basic skills instructor, to find an administrator and another instructor and apply for this really, really valuable and helpful PD opportunity that will help you implement all of the things that we quickly talked about today. We need time, and that's how we get it. And we can also learn more about the work of our friends in content-based classes and how we can work with them. We have a final webinar in this series, May 24th at 1 p.m. with the masterful Heidi Wrigley. We're more and more of us are being pushed to and encouraged and are getting excited about connecting language learning with content. And so this is a great webinar for you to learn more. We've scratched the surface. And we've talked about a lot, differentiation and scaffolding and some big bang activities. So I'm going to turn it over to, well, I'll just finish up, Jennifer. I know that we have an evaluation, and I'm going to ask you when you leave this time together with us, and I thank you for giving us your time, that you complete the evaluation. We use this to help us move forward. Thank you so much to Marion and to Jennifer and to each and every one of you for joining us today. I hope you found this of value, and I look forward to further conversations in the field with you.
Thank you so much, Dave. And I'm giving you a round of applause, and I hope you guys all remember how to do that from your menu at the top. You gave us a lot of food for thought. I have to admit, I'm one of that lowly minority whose head is exploding right now. But there's a lot here, a lot for us to process, and a lot for us to discuss. And I appreciate Susan's suggestion to continue having these discussions. And one place that we can do that is our electronic community of practice. I put a link there in the chat. And if you email me or Jennifer, you can get more information about that. So that's just a place to discuss with your colleagues what you're thinking about as you're working on implementing the ELPS. And I hope you take advantage of that. So thank you so much for being here. When we close this meeting, you will be taken to an evaluation form. Please fill out the evaluation form. Let us know how this went for you and what we could do better. And I hope to see you all either at the Professional Learning Communities Institute or the next webinar about ELPS with Heide Spruck-Wrigley in May. She's a fabulous presenter and a very knowledgeable person in this area. And have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone, and I will be closing the meeting in 1 minute, so you can take a moment to download anything that you have not yet downloaded, and also do click on the links for the upcoming events and courses. But if you do not get a chance to do that, when we post the webinar recording to the website by the end of this week, you will be able to do that within the recording as well. You'll have the controls to be able to do that. And thank you so much for joining us all today, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.